Hey everyone, before I get started, I just want to remind you that if you like my content, hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and then join the Militiaman and Crew Patreon community by clicking the link in the caption. Hey everybody, Militiaman and Crew, just wanted to get with you guys for an update. I think we got some good stuff, but in the meantime, I want to tell you too is that Militiaman and Crew with Patreon.com. Appreciate everybody being with us, and also in our Discord chat room. So everybody, thank you again. Some really good things have been happening in the last 48 hours, and we have more to come. Think about it for a minute though, just to recap a little bit. Time to remove the zeros. Why would somebody bring out an article that says time to remove the zeros? It's because, well, we already know that they're going to do something like that. There's some pros and cons about that, but the decision has been made. Al-Sudani said that project still exists, so if there's a decision that has been made, if there has been, it means treating this whole thing in a different light, because Al-Sudani has basically talked about creating value, and so has Al-Sudani. Al-Sudani has stated more than once that the dinar is stronger than the dollar. And why would he lie about that? Well, he might know things that you and I don't know. Well, it would be obvious at this stage of the game where we're headed is that that's probably a true statement. And he's probably not going to be considered a liar. He's probably going to just come out in history as being one heck of a prime minister, just like Al-Sudani is actually not incompetent. He's probably very competent, or he wouldn't be there today. All right, so look, the use of electronic payments, we talked about that. Basically, there's some reasons that they talk about electronic payments, because when they use and they change from one system to another, they're going to have less cash, and so they talked about that yesterday in my video. It talks about electronic payment transactions and the culture of that with the citizens has been expanding, and they have data that's out that they talk about just how many points of sales systems that they put out, and they put out what they consider more than acceptable, or it's going to keep growing, but what they have out, like 50,000 units. 50,000 units is a lot, but interesting. Another thing is they happened to drop on us the other day, just yesterday, was the World Trade Session, World Trade Organization. They called it the World Union of, Iraq's accession to the Federal Union of World Trade Points. Well, you're going to find that has to do with the WTO's secession. So, a mechanism for Iraq's accession to the Federal Union of World Trade Points and the legal procedures for joining, the advantages that Iraq sectors will receive. We all know about that. They go back into some of the history, not terribly important, because the WTO has been around for quite some time. What is they talk about? They also discuss the issue of transformation of electronic commercial systems. So we talked about that, and what are they talking about? Electronic. We're talking about private sector. We're talking about introducing to the outside world and the advantages of Iraq's industries. So they talked about that. So keep that in mind, because 74, 75 countries involved in all of that. That's a lot of trade, you guys. Central bank news we talked about yesterday was is that the average market injection, it says that the Central Bank of Iraq confirmed that the work is underway to reduce the price of a dollar against the dinar in the coming days. Well, we talked about that's not necessarily true, because the Central Bank of Iraq doesn't reduce the dollar on the market in the world. They don't reduce the dollar. No, nobody does, but the United States of America and or other economies dragging it down, pulling it back up. Strength of our economy in the United States, it isn't the Iraqi dinar. The opposite would be true, is that what would give support to the dollar? Well, if the United States of America has a significant amount of dinar, which I believe they do, and the dinar becomes valued to where it should, or with a real effective exchange rate, all boats rise with the tide. Our buddy Petra likes to say, anchor in what you know, and that's one of the things that we do know. So when are they talking about this? They're talking about the average market injection is about 200 million per day, and we know that to be true because they had an injection, and they've had since July they've had billions of dollar purchases. In this particular case, what they're talking about is something slightly different than that. But what they do is that they use dollars from oil sales to cover their imports. But the black market has an effect of its own, because people are still trying to buy and sell illegally. And that's just happens to be one of those cash cows that those that are neighboring countries like to tap into for many illicit industries. But that's going to cease to exist here in the short term. And that's been why a lot of these politicians too have been trying to get rid of Al-Sudani for over a year and a half. And we talked about that as well, but we didn't do it yesterday. The governor of the central bank said they have made serious efforts to solve the problem, and transfers will return to normal, and likely when? Next week. That's now, time this week. That's what we're talking about. And are they going to talk with the Federal Reserve and the United States Treasury again here shortly? There is talk of that to happen. So we'll see if that does happen in the very short term. We talked about the Bank of International Settlements. Maybe we didn't have an article specifically out on it in my time, but yesterday there was one where, no, forgive me, it's been about 4 days now, that tomorrow might be a big day for the Bank of International Settlements, talking about 50 economies coming out and having reports on 50 economies, which they haven't done before. Change of pattern gets our interest. Be sure. Why is the Bank of International Settlements? They're talking big time on points of sales, electronic payments, cross-border payments. Bank of International Settlements is involved in all that. So keep all that in mind. So the advisor, Prime Minister to Financial Affairs, we know Mohammed Saleh, when he talks, we like to listen. He says the adoption of the dinar in pricing oil, we talked about that yesterday. We talked about fixed rates. We talked about flexible rates. We're talking about exchange rates, right? Interest rate is what they're talking about as well. So pros and cons, they talked about that. They talked about deviations between oil prices and the petrodollar. And they talked about the exchange rate. The Petro-dinar, according to the international market data, will be considered a cost that requires compensation by paying fewer dinars. Yeah, because if the dinar is worth a heck of a lot more, you're not going to, why would you give them 13.10 if it's not going to be that, you don't need to, you wouldn't. Collecting the higher dinar in the opposite cases, of course. International reserve currencies or foreign currencies held by the central banks and global financial institutions as part of their cash reserves is normal. So eventually maybe what would happen if Iraq's currency becomes significantly value and desirable because of the fact that they're going to have so much trade going through that country. People are going to need it. They're going to desire to have some. So it's going to be, some strength's going to come from that. The Development Road Project is going to be a massive underlay. It's going to have underlying currents because there's going to be so many offshoots, all the different businesses, all the different employees, all the little mound systems, if you will, that create employment, create jobs, more jobs, create more jobs. It's amazing, and keep all of that in mind. These currencies are used in international transactions, settling debts between countries, and are standard for international payments and facilitating global trade. So at some point in time, Iraq is going to be, if they're talking about a Petro-dinar, what they're suggesting is Iraq will be one of those currencies that has the strength to compete with all of the others that are involved. And in this particular thing that they talked about yesterday, it says the global oil market will control the fluctuation of the local currency, which is what? The Petro-dinar. Well, you don't have a Petro-dinar today, you guys. So some change is coming. In addition to the importance of international recognition of it, financial infrastructure necessary to support such operations of the Petro-dinar. So financial infrastructure, haven't they done all that? Haven't they been talking about the point of sales, 50,000 of them? Aren't they talking about also the ICE Cutta system, the Buna platform, all of these different electronic things, the blockchain? We talked about in 2023, a Ripple and the Iraqi dinar. You remember all those things? I'm telling you guys, we have to start thinking outside the box again. Aside from just Iraq dinar, wait until you find out what else is coming it's going to be amazing. In my view, just my view. All right, well, so in other words, the strategy of relying on the value of currency directly on oil exports may make the value of the local currency vulnerable to fluctuations in the global market. Okay, sure. Just like anything else, there's always risks. Everything's going to be risk oriented. But one of the things that we talked about, they're going to have non-oil revenue streams. It's an offset. The architects of what's happening with this country have done a very, very good job. In fact, it's going to be amazing, and I'm glad to be around to be able to share it with you guys, because I'm very passionate about it, and I have every reason to be, because I think there's some really big things that are going to happen in this world. And you know what? Not all the nefarious are going to win. I think good's is going to have its day too. Okay. Exchange rate system, when they talked about that, I'm not going to get into it again, but they're talking about the strength and stability of the Iraqi dinar will remain linked to the factors of real growth, real diversity in the national economy, in addition to achieving an appropriate surplus in the current account of balances. I think there's some of the stuff they've already done, of payments, linking the national currency to start a basket, linking a national currency to a basket of foreign currencies that provide stability in the value of the dinar itself. So not to go on too much, but that's a powerful statement, you guys. So that was from yesterday. And then what we have also, consensus accepting the usability of electronic payments, which means less cash. Less cash just moves to the direction that everybody's moving away from around the world towards just less cash. It doesn't mean they're not going to have any cash anymore, everybody. It just means that they're just going to have less of it, okay? Everybody likes to have their currency. Everybody likes to have the meanings behind currency. They do. People like to look at the coins. They like to look at the currency. They like to look at the security features. They collect those things, and that's not going to change. You can't take that away from people. They're probably not likely to do that, but they can change things in a different manner to do business faster, more efficiently, more transparently, because less cash means to them, to a lot of people, less corruption. So, well, hopefully they have us in their best interests. I think the blockchain ledgers that they're going to be using and that technology that they've come up with is going to have, it might be spooky to a lot of people, and it might be over the top for some people. But then again, you know what? Change is tough sometimes. And I'm open to it, but I'm also, pretty grounded, because guess what? We still need to do business, everybody. We still need to do business. So we're going to leave that alone. But I don't know, you guys. That stuff is pretty killer, because I'm focused in on there's more to the story. Because look, the dinar, PetroDinar, you're going to have to go on the Forex for that. You got to think about, a lot of this stuff is in depth. It's like, wow, it's hard to get everything out. But the bottom line is that if you're going to have a PetroDinar competing with the petrodollar, you're going to have some value for that. 1,310 is not worked, and they haven't done it yet. It doesn't mean they're going to try it. I think that would be a failure. I'm pretty sure these guys are smarter than me. Al-Sudani stresses the importance, this is today, Al-Sudani stresses the importance of adopting sound economic and reform foundations in restructuring public companies. Well, isn't that what they were talking about with Ernst & Young? They were going to do the banking system. They talked about that. Those are the biggest components Ernst & Young is working on, but they're also now, they said they would also do, secondary to the banking systems, would be reforming foundations and restructuring public companies. So they have a supreme committee for restructuring public companies, according to a mechanism that preserves public money and is based on sound economic, administrative, and economic reform that the government is pursuing in its program. So they're doing all that stuff, and he's not giving up on it. The process of classifying companies according to performance and specialization. So they're going to go in and look at which companies are the best according to performance. How is it going to work? What's their specializations? And what are they going to do? They're going to, in order to do these things, they're going to do it in order to develop an accurate picture that takes into account the public's interest. So again, they've been doing this. And here's a sidebar. you realize that Al-Sudani used to be very, very vocal when the citizens weren't having their needs met? Have you heard Al-Sudani and Al-Sudani have any issues? No, you haven't. I think that's big. Didn't Al-Sudani put millions of people in the streets whenever he felt like doing so because he wanted action? He did. Has he done that with Al-Sudani? Not so far. Has he indicated he might in the future? Not so far. So I bring that up just because that's kind of a grounding thing. It's like, wait, things are going better than everybody thought or thinks in some cases. Okay, so it says the process of classifying companies according to that is specialized, taking care of the interests. Supreme Committee for Restructuring Public Companies continues to be held at a more accelerated pace. So they're moving it up. He's talking about keeping pace with aspects of economic reform in other sectors whose work is related to the task of these companies. So aside from that, these guys now have an article out today that Iraq avoids the gray list. You guys remember what Iraq was on, a blacklist at one time, right? Then they moved to the gray list, which we thought, wow, that's pretty good. We're moving forward. Well, now they're saying that Iraq has avoided the gray list. They're saying, well, as a temporary victory over the beginning of a new crisis, question. So they're kind of being pessimistic in this article. But basically, it says in a remarkable development, the Anti-Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing Office in Iraq announced that the country is far from being included in the gray list. After the mutual international evaluation that Iraq underwent for 14 months, sounds pretty intense, that the initial results of the international assessment showed that Iraq does not deserve to be included in the gray list, which requires enhanced follow-up. Okay, so it goes on to say through many paragraphs, it says such as the automation of procedures and the activation of the quote, end quote, the GO AML, I think GO anti-money laundering system that comes at a critical time as the government seeks to expand an updated and comprehensive database and keep pace with international standards. So look, they had a 14-month evaluation, and aside from the pessimism coming from the author, it sounds like, who are we going to listen to? The Anti-Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing Office. And so it sounds like they know a little bit more than everybody else. So I'll go with that, and I probably would think at this stage of the game, after all the things that Al-Alaq's been through, his history of what his expertise is about, his dealings with the United States Federal Reserve and his dealing with the United States Treasury, and I think them having a floor on the Central Bank of Iraq, I think the pessimism here could very well be just like those guys that are having a fit and falling in it because they can't do the dollar auctions anymore the way that they've done it in the past. Now, so think about that for a minute. When I say done before and done in the past, there was legitimate and illegitimate. Okay? Correlate that, because the new systems are not going to be not monitored, not transparent. In the past, they've been not so well. So, okay, so this article basically, it says, in numbers, the central bank buys dollars from the Ministry of Finance in an unprecedented move since 2003. So there's been a pattern change. So now that all of a sudden the Ministry of Finance, not the central bank, has, the central bank buys dollars from the Ministry of Finance in an unprecedented move. So there's a big change. So it says the economic expert revealed the unprecedented figure for the value of the dollars purchased by the Central Bank of Iraq and the Ministry of Finance in that last month of July, was purchased at 9.6 billion. And so basically they go on to say that they hadn't done all this in such a long time, but what did they want to use it for? They made this increase to purchase in the Ministry of Finance need for local currency to cover its increase in expenses over the past years, especially with the increase in the operating and spending and raising the level of spending in the 23, 24, and 25 budgets. So everybody knows that there's a operational side, which is all the expenditures for employment, paying bills, all those different things, salaries, everything, right? But they also haven't talked about the investment side of things, all the projects, all those contracts they spent money for, okay? Level of spending in the tripartite budget. This gentleman, Al-Obadi, expecting that this rate will rise in the coming months with the central bank's inability to meet the needs of Iraq dinars. So they didn't say dollars, they're talking about the need for dinars. Why would they need to have a need for that? Well, if you guys remember, years past, and collectively, they've been bringing in 20K notes because of 25K notes, because they've been using less cash. They're doing electronic, right? So that's basically all the money that comes in get credited onto cards. And so they've been absorbing cash. And so if you think about that, you go, well, that's interesting. Well, then all that time also, what were they doing in the background? They were destroying money. They had been before they really got in earnest with the cash electronic payment systems. So in tandem, they didn't tell you yet how much money they destroyed yet or taken off the books, have they? They haven't, but they say that they're having a problem with liquidity and they're having a problem with the ability to meet the need for Iraqi dinars, which may force an increase in the issued monetary mass because they've taken away to meet the ministry's expenditure needs. So they're going to need money to be replaced. Could that be the new small category notes with more value? The mass they need. I think that's where I'm headed with it, because why in the world would you go out and destroy a bunch of money, effectively good quality money, make it into pellets for burning, when you're going to go and create new 25K notes? Does that make any sense to anybody? Do you think they built that big, huge, massive building that they've completed, it looks like, from the pictures, to have more inflation and a cheaper exchange rate, less than 1310? Because that's what they would be doing. They would have to create 25,000K notes, 50,000K notes, all those smaller notes. But here they're talking about creating mass in a situation where that's not where they're headed. They're creating value. They're talking about the Petro-dinar. So you can see that it doesn't make any sense whatsoever to any person that really pays attention to what they own and knows what they hold, okay? Iraq's Association of Islamic Banks announces today its support for the central bank's measures. It says the Iraqi Association of Islamic Banks announced on Monday its support for the procedures of the central bank, which is to establish a national company specialized in managing electronic payments. There we go again. Managing electronic payment is a positive step in developing the financial development system. Okay. It supports the measures of the Central Bank of Iraq. That's what they're in support of, especially what was accomplished in the previous stage and its upcoming rounds in its dialogue with the United States Treasury and the U.S. Federal Reserve to return banks deprived of the U.S. dollar. The association appreciated in this statement, publicly, the continuous efforts made by the central bank and the Anti-Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing Office through its committee, which resulted in a positive evaluation by the Financial Action Task Force, the FATF. So ultimately what they say is the establishment of the central bank of a national company specialized in managing central electronic payments in Iraq is a positive step in developing financial development systems and enhancing the efficiency of electronic payments in the country. So in other words, they have to either have given some really good assurances that they're not going to skirt the rules, or they're going to have to play by the rules and they're ready to go because they've met the criteria to be able to be part of the system again. Look, to me, this is a very bullish development. Is that if these banks, that they got pictures of all the boys that are there, the Association of Bankers, you can see them, they're public. Those are the guys that they're trying to get back into the system. It's a reputational risk situation. Listen, banks, if you got Chapter 7 on you, bankruptcy, not a good thing. Al-Sudani was instrumental in helping keep Iraq out of Chapter 7, for instance, so that Iraq could even get here today. You got to go back in history. It takes a long time, but it's not totally necessary. But these guys have reputations. You get cut out of the big boy play because you didn't play by the rules, and you get tainted by corruption. You might not be able to do business very long, and you might get isolated. And I have a feeling these guys are looking at it in a standpoint is like, lack of a better term, you're darned if you do, you're darned if you don't. But we have a situation in this case where it's a lot of money that's going to go through Iraq. All those private banks want to tap into the lending aspect of things because they do make, not always, but they do make money off of interest and putting out money for investment and stuff. But they do like to do on the same as invest money into projects so that they can make some money too. So we'll see how that goes. But look, I appreciate it, you guys. This is really powerful information. This week is going to be powerful. I'm hoping there's an interesting report out, don't know exactly what it's going to be, but the Bank of International Settlements has told us that they were going to talk about 50 economies tomorrow. I'm hoping that some of those 50 economies have some significant changes in them that aren't negative. I hope they're positive because they have already facilitated or made a difference in the world to where that they have positive sides because of what they've done or what's going to happen. And I'm hoping that those that tide does rise and all boats seem to float in a positive way. So thanks everybody. Please, if you can, hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and always, of course, if you feel you can help with us, every little bit helps. Take care of all the crew. Is hit Venmo, Zelle, and PayPal. Thank you very much. Once again, guys, don't forget to hit that like button if you like this content, subscribe to the channel, or join us at the Militia Man and Crew Patreon community for even more exclusive content. You can also donate to this channel by hitting the links in the banner to help keep this page up and running. Your generous support is greatly appreciated as always. Much appreciated. Thank you so much and have a great day.